Nikki, are you ready?
I am, yes. Can you hear me okay?
Oh,
Yeah.
are you fine? Thank you. All right.
Perfect.
We'll get into the event then. Hello, everyone. My name is Joey. We're going to do a brief introduction of who we are and our clubs. And then from there, we're going to go meet the speakers. I'm a senior right now. I'm a biomed student, and currently I am the president of the View Pre-Health Club. We're looking for more leadership in the future, but we're here to guide you all towards research and as well as the health-based careers and to help prepare you for your future.
Hi everyone, I'm Alex. I'm the president of SACNAS, which stands for the Society for the Advancement of Chicanos slash Hispanics in Science. We promote a general community that represents underrepresented individuals to help them get into field research, just research in general in the fields of science.
Hello, everyone. My name is Damaris. I'm a third year student or junior. I am majoring in biomedical and minoring in chemistry, and I'm the president of American Chemical Society, ACS, here on campus, and that's the secretary and the vice president. So if you guys haven't heard about ACS, we are just starting ACS here on campus. Well, we're reinstating ACS on campus, but Joey was kind enough to invite us to this event, so we're helping out and supporting. But if you guys are interested and have any more questions, feel free to come up to me or Celeste or Josh.
Thank you. I'm also on ACS as well. I do finances, treasurer. So cool. That's why we get connected with you guys. But yeah, thank you so much for getting the chance to meet us. Now we'd like to grant you all a chance to meet our speakers. Nikki, would you like to go first?
Hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me virtually. And my name is Nikki Grotewold, and I'm a fifth year MD PhD student at the University of Michigan. And I'm happy today to chat about absolutely anything and answer any questions. Thanks for having me.
Hi guys, I'm a first year biomedical PhD student at UCR. I was also biomed when I was here. I know what biomed. Hi. Sorry.
Ellie is actually an alumni from Vanguard Universe. She's been a good friend of mine for a good long time. But anyway, let's get a chance to also meet the speakers a little bit deeper. We're going to ask you guys some icebreakers. Alex, you want to ask the first one?
Of course. So we know what your name is, but what is your current educational pursuit? Like where are you attending, what are you studying, what are your career goals?
Oh, okay. So I think when I graduate after UCR, I would like to be a principal investigator. I would like to lead my own lab and stay in academia. Currently, I'm more interested in immunology, neuroscience stuff, possibly pharmacology. But yeah.
And I'm also interested in the PI route, but I would also want to be a practicing clinician. And my current field of interest is neurology. And so I'm thinking that most likely I'd have maybe like a movement clinic while studying movement disorders in the lab, and in that way sort of combine both my career paths.
Well, again, thank you for that. And then we're going to get into, so how did you get where you are right now? Do you guys have any programs that you're very passionate about that got you where you're at? Anything you feel like accelerated your progress? What do you feel?
Yeah, great question. So, one of the things that are really helpful are summer, like undergraduate research programs. So REU programs, research experiences for undergraduates. They have different names across the country, but they're usually 8 to 10 or 12 week programs that are fully paid. They give you a salary, they pay for your living expenses, and also they pay for your food, etc. And they connect you with a lab. And it usually culminates with maybe a poster presentation or an oral presentation, and usually also a letter of recommendation. It can culminate in a paper as well or a publication. And so I definitely recommend those experiences for everyone. There are experiences across every university. So my biggest recommendation is to just kind of pick areas across the country that you'd want to live in for the summer and sort of apply to quite a few places because they are competitive, but also just because they don't accept that many students as well. And then just be real about what you aim to get out of these programs. So if your goal is to become a PI like Ellie, or if your goal is to just to learn more, that's totally okay too if you're earlier in your career, but just be very real about what you're trying to learn. And I think that was the most helpful thing in my journey.
Actually, I had a question for you too. So when you applied, do you apply to the PhD program first, or are you applying to the MD first?
That's a really good question. So it depends on the university. It's usually through the MD program first. So the MD program, you have to apply through a primary application first. And then there you have this little button and it says, do you want to do MD, MD PhD, or do you want to apply for both? And so for a lot of schools, they actually consider you for both programs. And you might get, say, rejected from the MD PhD program, but they'll still say, we would love to have you for an MD interview. And then usually the med school signs off on you first and the PhD just kind of accepts you because the way you're funded is a little bit different. And so you're not actually occupying a PhD spot. And so the MD PhD programs at most universities are sort of run in parallel, but a little separate from the PhD programs. There are some other universities where you also have to apply to the PhD program at the same time and be considered by both committees before being accepted.
Ellie, you can also kind of touch on the resources that you found were helpful at Vanguard as well. But anything that sort of you felt accelerated your progress to apply to PhD programs?
I think I would have to agree with him in that CERP definitely that definitely helped. I really didn't know what I wanted to do my sophomore year, but I did CERP with Dr. Reyes, and that was really helpful. Even though I think it's not a project that I could see myself doing for grad school, it really helped me to understand, okay, what does research entail? Like what am I getting myself into? And then I think definitely going to Ecuador with Dr. C also helped. So I went with Joey and a group of other people on that missions trip. And that was more of the medical side. So at the time I was still kind of debating what I wanted to do. I I did enjoy the trip. I really liked it, but I think in the end, just the patient care experience was not something that I leaned towards. I ended up working in the clinical lab or volunteering most of my time there. And I was like, hey, this lab stuff is great. So I kind of went from, okay, maybe not med school, but maybe like a clinical lab technician. And then that's when I was actually talking to Dr. Hannah about it. And he was like, hey, have you ever heard of the PhD program? And I was like, really? Okay. So that's kind of what led me here. And then when I realized I did want to do research, I actually did a project at Loma Linda, which was through another SURF program. So like he said, it is, 8 to 10 weeks. They do give you, well, I was about to say a stipend. It's not a stipend, but they do pay you. They will house you. And yeah, you get to work under a lab for that certain amount of time. For me, it ended in an abstract. Some people, it could end in a paper. It's a little more rare though, so I would say like don't get discouraged if it doesn't end up that way. But in the end, the letter of rec is probably the most important. Because that's what you're using to apply to a lot of these PhD programs. Like you said, it's really competitive. So the more letters of rec you have, the more research experience you have, the better. I got in with 2. So there's no like set number, but definitely just to have that experience beforehand really helps.
I have a question for you, Ella.
Yeah.
So you brought up 2 things specifically about Vanguard, right? You talked about CERT and this experience you had with Dr. C. Could you elaborate on what CERT is, how can students apply for it, along with this experience you had with Dr. C, where you went to another country to do clinical study?
So for the missions trip, it's through the GEO office that you can apply for. Honestly, for CERT, I don't remember. I think I got an email from Dr. Ochoa or Dr. Hannah that kind of guided me there. And then during class, I started asking questions because I was a junior at this point, and you do need that research to graduate. So I just asked her questions, tried to ask kind of what the projects were. And then she was telling me, oh, like I have a couple students that I want to take, and then Dr. Reyes wants to take another couple students. Like, would you be interested? And so I said yes, because I liked the idea, but I wasn't exactly sure yet between like med school and research, so that really helped. But yeah, so for the missions trip, it was through GEO. For CERP, I think it was Dr. Ochoa or Dr. C that emailed me directly.
Thank you for letting us in. So I have another question for both of you. What is your graduate school program or programs looking like currently? Um, just personal things like have you made experiences that have necessarily guided you in one direction that you didn't initially think you would go? Or, anything that they've made you realize about yourself, things that have made you realize about the field that you're going into, that might be helpful for students to know.
Or I'll let him go first.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I think when you're considering a graduate school program, whether it's master's, whether it's MD or PhD, either way, you kind of want to pay attention to a few of like the lifestyle things. So you're gonna be there for a few years, so you want to make sure you like where you're living, but also that the culture of the program is something that is sort of helpful for you having a good experience, especially when things go bad. I mean, with the PhD, you're gonna have like failed experiments. You're gonna have things that don't go well. With MD, you're gonna have challenging tests. There are gonna be times when you're not happy, and so during those times when you're not happy, you really want to ask about, what are support systems that are already present in the system, or what are ways that I can sort of create some more support systems if they aren't present. And a lot of ways that my school has done that, and that I've heard from other schools as well, is just by having sort of for example, like study sessions where like students really collaborate together has been really helpful for med school. Most med schools across the country right now are pass fail. And so it's like a lot of a more collaborative thing. It's not really how you see in the shows where it's like, who's the best? Like, can we tank everyone else's grades? That was kind of a surprise for me. I thought it'd be a lot more competitive. And so I was really happy to see that. And I think it made it a lot easier to make friends too when you're studying like with each other instead of against each other. And then with that, it's sort of like how open is the place you choose to go to making new student organizations, to making support groups, things like that. And at my school, it's been like essentially every time I've reached out to a faculty, they've been super open to just helping me out with whatever I want to do. And whether that's giving money from the school, or whether that's putting in time or putting in effort, or sometimes you just need someone to sign off and say like, yeah, we're okay with you doing that. And I think that's been a really, really, really helpful thing for me. I kind of thought that it would be this isolating process to go to grad school. Oh, did I lose everyone? Or all right. I kind of thought it would be this isolating process to go to grad school, but it's actually been really supportive. And so I would say ask about those support systems. You might not need them, but if you do, you want to know where they are before you start. So I would say that's the biggest thing.
I mean, I'll definitely add on to what he said because at least for the biomed program at UCR, what they have you do is I'm basically taking all of the first year med school courses. So with other programs that you would apply to, for example, if you like neuroscience, you would be expected to go and find a lab in neuroscience. You would be expected to take neuroscience classes. But biomed is like this huge umbrella. And so the good thing about it is that you're able to reach out to faculty and PIs of a bunch of different, a bunch of different labs. Maybe if you're still kind of deciding, you don't really know, like, I want to try neuroscience, but I don't want to commit yet. So it's a good way to like try things. It's also like expands the faculty list for you, which is super great. For those topics that may not have as much faculty. So for UCR right now, I think probably neuro is the biggest. Just FYI. But yeah, so because we're taking the first year med school courses with the med students, I found it helpful for me to like make friends with them and study with them. If you want to do that, like you're not required to, but hey, it makes it a lot less lonely. It also kind of you can make friends. Like it's late night study sessions are always fun. So it's definitely less isolating in that way. For me in particular, like my family was always in California. So that was never like, it was a consideration because I did want to be close for when, like he said, things don't always work, for when sometimes you feel discouraged. And I've only been in this program for a year. So, but even then there have been like discouraging moments, but at the same time, it's nice to have like my family relatively nearby. So it was a factor, but I think for me at least, the more important factors were the research, were the program requirements, that kind of stuff. I found that to be pretty important. Yeah.
Let's see, you wanna ask me a question next, or, okay? I'd say one of the kind of other questions I have for you guys is, what do you feel like is the most difficult part that you guys have discovered upon being accepted into your graduate schools? Whether it's into your PhD program or your med school years.
Oh, do you want to go first?
Sure,
Sorry.
yeah, I can go first. I would say that there's some cliches that are going to be most difficult, and then I'll go into like some maybe not as cliche, like maybe more personally difficult. I would say for med school, everyone tells you it's just like drinking from a fire hose and of information, and it definitely was like that. It's a lot of information. They definitely try to streamline it so you can at least retain most of it, temporarily at least, in that you make this really good foundation. But it's a lot of studying. I would say that I was very prepared for that, at least in the sense of I was told that it was going to be that way. So I wasn't surprised when it became that. For grad school, I would say that the biggest thing that most people usually sort of reference as the biggest thing is it's really hard to find your direction at the beginning. So when you're a first year grad student, second year grad student, after you found a lab, it's hard to find that project that sort of becomes your project. You're creating something that no one's ever researched before. You're making, if you're engineering, you're making a product no one's ever made before. So unless you're building off of someone else or you're sort of fed a project by your mentor, you're sort of in this challenging spot where like you need to come up with something out of nothing, and it can make for a really challenging first year where you're just thinking a lot and you're reading a lot, and at times you're like, oh, I came up with this amazing idea, but science has come a long way. And then you go and you look at and you read the literature and you're like, people have done this before though. And that's just part of the learning. But I would say the hardest part for me personally has been you can sort of do anything you want with your free time. And there is free time. So I think that is an important part. So there is free time to be healthy. And I think that you should always do those things. But sort of in the direction of taking your career where you want to go, you sort of have every door is open. So you can do research with whoever you want to do research with. And that goes for both the medical world and also the grad school world. And you can volunteer with whoever you want to volunteer with, or you can do leadership in any way you want to. And you sort of need to measure your time because you don't have unlimited time. And at the end of your time, which might be 4 years or it might be 8 years, I'm in an 8 year program, so it's a little more time. I sort of need to measure where do I want like my resume or my experiences to look for those people that are looking in 8 years time. And that's sort of how I've maybe structured some of the experiences I've had that I don't put in just like the fun category. And I think that's been really challenging for me because there are so many options and just because I enjoy doing so many things. So I would say strategizing and sort of thinking a few years ahead is really good, both as an undergrad, but also once you get to grad school and realistically at any point in your career, just sort of being like, if I do this experience, it's going to maybe take up 10% of my time. What will that look like if I do that for, say, the next 5 years or so? Will that be convenient for me? Will that be something I'll be happy with? And so really strategizing long term, I think is the biggest challenge.
Okay. I'm definitely gonna add on to what he said. I think for me it's a little different because I haven't gotten to the part yet where I have my own project, right? So far in rotations, it's just been like you're helping out with other people's project. But I think probably the two hardest things were the transition from here to there. Obviously, it's very different from private to public, and funding, because there is a huge issue with funding right now, to the point where it's been hard for even me to find a lab. And so, in our program, you get 3 rotations and you have to do it like 10 weeks each about. And so, because, you 10 weeks is not a lot of time. It kind of is in the sense for rotation, but in the long term, it's like not a lot of time. So I think you really want to narrow your topics down and then really make sure that you're looking at the PI before you ask to rotate, because that could save you a lot of time. Like only consider PIs that you really think, okay, I could join this lab, because the rotation is just that's what it's for, is to figure out, can I see myself doing this project? Can I see myself working in this environment? And is the PI a good mentor? And I think the more important question is the PI a good mentor? Because it could be like the best research topic in the whole world, and you could get so many publications off of it, but you are going to be working with your lab and with your PI for the next 5 years. So that's exactly why they give you these rotations, is to kind of figure that out. And then I think just the transition from here to there, because here, the department is a bit small. Even for the project that Dr. Reyes and I did, we only had like a couple grants to do it. But even the structure was very different. So the PIs here are very attentive to you. They're very helpful. Like, I would say all of them, really. Over there, the PIs have a lot of other things to do. They are like the chair of a department, they are managing other things, they need to apply for grants mostly. And so a lot of the times they're not really like in the lab to like mentor you as closely as you would have preferred if you are a person that really prefers to have one-on-one guidance. Just know that it's a little bit difficult to find a PI who's willing to do that because they have a lot of other things going on, especially because of the whole grant thing right now. It's been really hard for a lot of PIs to get funding.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I have a question from Damaris.
Yes,
Oh.
I have a question, and I know that he kind of talked about this, but having free time now, I'm sure you guys are crazy busy. But if you do have any free time, are you using that free time for a hobby? Are you using it for an activity, an extracurricular? Are you using that to gain job experience? And if you don't have free time now, did you have free time as an undergrad? Kind of like doing, like I said, job experience and then building up to your decision of wanting to go to grad school?
I think definitely undergrad, I had a lot more free time. Because like I said, at least for UCR's biomed PhD program, they're having you take all the stuff that the med students are taking for the first year. So it is, I can confirm, like a fire hose of information. Where especially if I hadn't, maybe I didn't take neuroscience here. It just wasn't enough time for me to schedule that in because I actually graduated a bit early. So now that I'm here doing neuro classes, it's a lot. It's a lot of info. But I do still have free time. Ultimately, I think it is kind of a cliche when they're like, oh my God, like even in your free time, you're doing like 5 jobs. The other thing too is that in this program, or at least for graduate school, they don't like it when you have a job. So I think it's actually in the contract that you can't. Because they'll pay you a stipend. So that's another thing that I didn't know. Because a lot of people are like, oh, it's kind of expensive, I'm gonna have to get student loans. They actually give you a stipend, but it's kind of like a double-edged sword. Because obviously the PI has to have fun and the school has to have fun. And so, yeah, I mean, I would use my free time for hobbies, for anime, for a lot of other things, right? But I guess like, yeah, it's not like I'm working every breathing second of the day. Like I still do get 7 hours of sleep. So whenever they tell you like, oh, we don't get sleep, just sleep. Because if you're not functioning well, like you're not gonna be doing a good job. So, you know.
Yeah, I had a lot of free time as a med student. It's just like what you do with that free time that matters. I think one of the big differences between like undergrad and med school is in undergrad you're sort of pretty spread out. If you're pre-med, you're trying to volunteer while doing research in a lab. You're also taking classes, and it's a lot of classes, right? Like 15 to 18 credit hours is a lot. And they're also like 5 or 6 different classes, right? So you're gonna have midterms, finals, all hitting at different times. It's pretty all consuming, and you do get summers off, you get spring breaks off, and those times should be very cherished because they do come to an end at one point. But it is, I think undergrad is the hardest to find like true free time. Um I would say that in med school, the difference sort of is like, at least the way mine is set up, is it's just kind of like one class. And so when I have a quiz, it's over all of the material that I'm learning. And so like, yeah, I have maybe like 30 hours of lectures a week, and maybe I have a quiz every 2 week on like 60 hours of lecture, and I need to be self-studying that, but it's just one quiz, right? And so I can sort of pick and choose where I put in my efforts. Also, super important, it's asynchronous. So, like, the lectures are recorded. So, if I wanted to watch them all at like 6 a.m., I could. But if I wanted to watch them at 5 p.m. because I had other things I had to do that day, I also could. And that flexibility is really valuable. And people leaned into it a lot at my school, sort of like traveling a bit on weekends, like enjoying and doing fun activities. And so I would say mostly the way I treated it was as an 8 to 5 job. And then I pretty much forced myself to be done by 5, go do some fun things for 3 or 4 hours, whether that's like cooking dinner, hanging out with friends. We chatted a little bit about hobbies and what hobbies I have. I've maintained playing piano throughout med school, and then I also played soccer. And there was not a big soccer community here, so I started like a soccer club, and now we play like in a semi-professional team with med students, and there are people that play D1 and things like that. I did not, but it's a lot of fun to learn from them. So like that's like something super organized but fun that like we do in our free time. And then I would maybe hit like another hour and a half before bed of studying. And so like maybe you're studying like 9, 10 hours a day. I don't think my brain personally can't go much more than like 10 solid hours of cramming stuff into my head. I think it's hard if you try to do more than that. And I think the biggest thing between undergrad and med school is there's a lot less busy work. It's just kind of like you need to learn all this stuff, but it's very relevant. It's very much like there's already a ton of material. They aren't there being like, okay, now do this little side project or like do this little homework. It's kind of like just study for the quiz. And like if you think you need to study more, you study more. And sometimes it can be hard to know those limits. But if you're done studying or you feel like you're set, then like you can have the night off or you can have the weekend off. My school is also very flexible. University of Michigan is very flexible. They open the quiz up on Friday and they let you take the quiz Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. And so if you take it on Friday, you have the weekend off. And then it's also pass fail, which I said before, and leaning into the pass is a very healthy mentality. And so it's still a lot of material. But the reality is like if you have studied enough to pass, like you're good. Like you don't need to study for 30 more hours if you're already done with the amount you did. And it's still a lot, but that does give you a little bit of a sanity check of like, I don't need a 100%. I can I can lean in with this pass. I'm going to be going over all this material again the next year, things like that. And so I think that's really healthy as well. But I would say if you don't have free time, either now or later on, you should reevaluate some of your commitments. And just like reevaluate whether like burnout will occur. Burnout's a very relevant topic right now in medicine, but also even in undergrad. And so the last thing you want to do is be sprinting full force and not be able to finish the race. And I've seen way too many people say that like they were tired, they didn't want to do this, and maybe that means, oh, I won't take the MCAT exam, maybe I won't finish my application. And if you're too tired or like are burnt out before that happens, then it's not really like that's not the point because then you didn't get to do the dream that you wanted to do. So taking care of yourself is the most important thing. This is a long road, both in the PhD realm, also in the MD realm. Uh, Also in the MD PhD realm, maybe a little longer in some areas, shorter in others. And so it's a long road. If you're not staying healthy, it's going to be hard to be able to maintain sort of the momentum you need to keep it going.
Wait, so I'm gonna actually follow up on what you said because I'm first of all I'm impressed that you can study 10 hours straight because I get bored past 2. Uh, so that's very impressive. The other thing is that I think you said that your quizzes were lenient. Ours are not. Ours are 8 a.m. to 9 on Monday every 2 weeks. It's just how it is. And then they're always late releasing our grades. But the other thing too is that I think it is true, at least for UCR too, that you can do the lectures online. And please do yourself a favor and don't, because really go in person. Or at least for me, I learned way better in person. That and also because it kind of structures your day, at least for like the grad student side. It was routine. I did class in the morning, had lunch, and then went to lab for however long my experiment took. So I think that was just the structure that I took, and I really liked it. So like right now I have a little bit more free time because I'm still like trying to find a lab, and I just finished a rotation. So I'm very happy that I can sit here and talk about this, right? But I think it's important to keep that in mind, that it is true. You do need to get sleep. You need to invest in your hobbies and what will prevent burnout. It is, I definitely can agree with that. Video games, whatever, comic books. I'm a dork, okay? Like, sorry. But I know some of the med students even they invited us to go on Discord. They've invited us to do tennis. I think one person in my cohort does it. I haven't yet, but I have like spent time with them just to hang out, you know, have fun. And so it's definitely important just to chill in your free time when you do have it. But at least for me, I think it definitely helped going to in-person class. Because sometimes like on Zoom or on an online recorded lecture, they don't always tell you what's going to be on the quiz. So it's better that if you just have a question, you can just go up to the professor and be like, hey, so you said this, what's up with that? Like, it's just more convenient, I think. But ultimately, I think it's also very personal up to you. So if you're a person who is like, I know that I can successfully do all these lectures over the weekend and still get a good grade on the exam, then like you do that. And I commend you for it. But I'm more of a person who needs to break it up per day. Instead of
Yeah, I was feeling more like that, but thank you for sharing. Thank you both for sharing.
Yeah, I would like to personally ask both of you a question regarding the topic of mentors, since that's something that came up a little bit earlier. I'm sure both of you have had experiences with higher ups, right? So I just want to see what you guys would consider maybe green flags or red flags coming from the people who you would consider to be the ones who are helping you guide you on your journey as you go through graduate school and hopefully move on to different parts of your life, right, into your career. So I just want to ask you guys what you have identified, maybe within certain PIs or something, like what are green flags or red flags to look out for?
Yeah, we could rattle off some green flags first and then maybe some red flags. Yeah. Okay. Probably green flag that they listen to what your goal is. So the PI or whoever your mentor is might have their own idea of what success is. You want to define what your success is and you want to communicate what that is, and then ask your mentor for help achieving your story of success. That's the first one.
Um, first green flag, I think if I would agree with that. Like if they are interested in you and they kind of ask you, okay, so like what is your interest? Like what are you looking for? If they, because the whole point of going into research is to be able to critically think for yourself. Because you are the one who's going to be working on this project. And so it's the PI's job because they might have, 5 different projects in the lab, depending on how big the lab is. Typically, most have at least 2. So it's their job to kind of direct you towards what project that you prefer and like help guide you to that kind of success. So I can agree with that.
Yeah. And so availability is really important too. Does the mentor have time in their schedule for you? And are they willing to put in the time? As a PhD mentor, you're obviously asking that person for a lot of time. As an MD mentor, maybe it looks a little bit more like, I don't know, check in every 6 months or every time you have a transition, like we talked about, which is a really hard thing. Maybe you're asking them for advice, like what did you do during your transition, things like that. So availability is important. Then I would say willingness to work with you on projects. These can be people, a mentor takes on so many different roles or can take on so many different roles. So you can have one person that does everything, or you can have a ton of different mentors. So maybe you have someone that helps you with funding. Maybe, and this has happened to me at times, like maybe it isn't enough, like my PhD professor isn't enough in terms of talking about things, or like the big picture or the small picture. And so then you just go chat with another colleague, and that could be the neighbor to your PI, and that's totally okay. And then you come back to your PI and you're like, oh, when I came out up with like these other ideas and I talked with other people who are experts. And so really never feel like you need to be limited to just the mentors you sign up for. And you never know when you might get another good mentor. It might be at a conference. It might be someone who's one of your peers, so same age. It might be someone who's on a like different career path that then motivates you to do that different career path. Could be someone in industry or someone in academia. It could be a doctor. It could be someone who decided they didn't want to be a doctor, and you're like, whoa, like I never thought of that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, I'm gonna agree again, but it is true. It's important. I know a lot of PIs will kind of, at least for the rotations I had, will leave their postdocs to kind of guide you on things. But because the thing is that you can't control like the type of people that are there. Ultimately, it's the PI that's making the decision to hire postdocs, to accept grad students, to um invite undergrads to join their lab. And so the people in the lab, it is helpful to have a good lab environment. It's true, like everyone wants that. But what's more important, again, is the relationship with the PI. Are they investing in you? Do they listen to you? Are they willing to guide you in the right direction? Are they willing to hear about your mistakes? And are they positive about it? Like, okay, like you made a mistake, so what are we gonna do differently this time? Instead of necessarily being like more micromanagey, which I've seen a lot of people do, or like getting upset really quickly. I would say the opposite of that would be the green flag. Mhm.
What about any red flags?
Definitely the opposite of all of those. Just generally, but it's important to recognize them because they can show differently. But I would say right now, some of the red flags, which doesn't need to be on purpose or not, but like when you're looking for labs, for example, some red flags right now are does not have funding, does not write enough manuscripts, right? So you want to make sure that you're going to go into a lab and that you're going to be able to produce a manuscript, right? Like that's what you need to graduate. It's also what you need to be recognized for the work that you're doing. So if you're joining a lab and that person hasn't published for a year or two, that's a lot for a professor. So you want to look at how productive that person's being, both in the grant section, but also in grant section, all of the grants for the NIH, NSF are all public. So you can look up all of the grants that people have in their labs on the NIH website. And they have the money amount listed and everything. They have how many years those grants are allotted for. And you can also look up all the papers that your professor has published and how recently and how much they're cited. And so these are all metrics that you can do of your own accord. And then I think it's always good to have sort of, and this is when your program becomes really important, to have people in the program that sort of are giving you inside information on the person's lab you might join. So have those really hard conversations with trusted faculty, with trusted students, trusted postdocs, because they might reveal things to you that are either really
Yeah.
positive or really negative that you're like, I wouldn't have found that out until I was 6 months into the lab. And the last thing you want to do is lose 6 months before you find out one of the red flags that may make you consider things.
That's true. It is tough to switch labs like halfway through, or I've known multiple people who've done it. It was difficult for them. Like I'm hoping that no one has to go through that. But I mean, I can definitely agree. Just talk to the grad students because I know a couple PIs are super nice when when people are rotating, but when you talk to the grad student, they'll be like, well, they were actually on my case. They like 24/7. They expected me to work like all night. They expected me to have like these results like the next day, very impatient. Or I have seen like PIs take a student and then kind of like guilt them into picking a topic that the PI is interested in, but then the PI like lost interest and then just completely ignored them. So I think that's kind of an extreme case. They ended up leaving, but I would say the key point is just talk to the grad students because it's very different to rotate for a few weeks versus like you're actually like this person's actually your mentor. You're actually needing to graduate, needing to publish, needing to do experiments. It's very different. And then I think like some can be very micromanagey, even like it's interestingly the more published ones. So sometimes like they have a really great reputation as far as, hey, I have a lot of grants, I publish a lot of papers, but they're not always available or they just don't have investment in your project. So
So definitely when you're looking for a mentor in the PhD realm, you want to look for, there's options. There's people who are really hands-on, which can be super beneficial at the beginning when you maybe don't know as much as a scientist. Then there are people who will meet you where you're at and maybe will let you, let your hand go a little bit as time goes on. And then there's people who are hands-off from the very beginning. I would say my experience has been more hands-off from the beginning, and there's just a really steep learning curve, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. As long as you're not getting overwhelmed and things like that, the goal is to learn in grad school. And so it's okay to feel like you're drowning for a little bit, as long as at some point the project starts going in a direction where you're going to be okay to graduate. But really the way I've looked at it is my goal is to learn the most possible so that when I become a I know the most things. And part of those things are mistakes that I'm going to need to make that I would not have had my hand been held to such a degree where like it was just easy. You never want anything to be easy at any point because that means you're just kind of not really getting everything that you can out of it. You're not really learning and that sort of thing. So push yourself. And if you don't feel like you're being pushed, then you can self-push for a lot of these things and you can say, what can I do? And it's not always like doing more hours. It's usually like, how can I push? What's like a new idea I can come up with? What's something new that I can do to make this novel and exciting for myself? Because you owe that to yourself.
Thank you.
Do you feel like, especially for you, Nikki, you mentioned on getting PIs specifically for research. Do you have any suggestions on how you got good mentors for the medical-based aspect? Anything for med school?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So with the MD, it's a little bit different. So in your first or second year, depending on the curriculum, you're usually in the classroom. And usually the people who are teaching those courses are very inclined to teach. And so they're usually very open to accepting questions and things like that. So I think that those first 2 years, it can be really easy to find a mentor because those are faculty that have said, I'm going to devote part of my time to teach. There are plenty of doctors that don't teach that are in the same hospital, right? That don't give lectures and things like that. So already there you have a really nice set of people that could be mentors. And then after that, from our clinical year, you sort of get assigned a mentor every time you go to a different into a different rotation or a clinical rotation. And sometimes you get someone that you really mesh with well, and sometimes less. And that doesn't mean they're bad mentors necessarily. It just might mean that your styles are different. But sometimes when you mesh with someone really well, they happen to be in a career path that you're interested in, that can be someone that can become a mentor. And so I think the biggest thing is you just need to ask them. And sometimes that can look as formal as saying like, hey, I'd love to meet every however so often you want to meet to talk about career advice and things unrelated to giving me a grade. And other times it just sort of happens. So there are courses in med school where like you are connected and you're in a smaller group. So for us, there's a doctoring course where they teach you sort of like skills to be a physician, and we're in a 10-person group. And so those mentors become someone that you can lean on really easily, and it's already structured into the program. And those are questions that you can ask when you're applying to schools as well, right? Like how easy is it to find a mentor and things like that. And then sometimes, and I think the important part here too, you can reach out to people that you haven't crossed paths with yet. If you have an interest in someone's clinical realm and someone's research realm, you can just reach out and say, hey, I would love to work with you. And that can look like working with each other for a week, or it can look like doing an independent research project. So besides my PhD, I was doing research during med school, and I published a few papers with a neurologist that ended up now being one of the mentors on my thesis committee. And so that's just something where I reached out. I did a cold email. I think I've cold emailed every single PI that I've ever been connected with, including in undergrad. And And if they don't respond, I just email them again. And sometimes I take the hint, but other times I just keep reaching out. And I just like reach out to a few at a time, right? And sometimes the fish bite and you have a new mentor, you have a new project. But I think that's the best way. Just like if you ask, you will find the people that are interested, or most likely they'll just say, "Hey, I don't have the time right now, but I would love to connect you with my colleague who does."
Well, thank you. Do we have any other questions, or do you want to go into the actual panel where we can actually we can ask questions? If we want, we're gonna leave the floor open to any questions if anyone has any. Just feel free to raise your hand and we'll yes, Josh.
So how does housing look like when you're in a PhD program? So I know it can vary from school to school or program to program.
You referring to on campus or off campus?
Either one.
Okay. I mean, I'm in off-campus housing, so, when I was here, I lived in dorms, but over there, they do have like graduate student dorms. It's just that the space is very limited, because I know that they demolished a certain building, so they had everyone from those buildings move over. And so for me, it was just easier to find like a room for rent in the area. And a lot of people that are kind of renting out in that area are students, grad students, or faculty. So there's a lot of, if you look just for general apartments or maybe like rooms for rent in the area, like you'll find something for a relatively decent price, especially like on the stipend they give you for the most part. I don't know how it is for med school, if you're allowed to be in dorms or.
Yeah, so I would say there are subsidized housing for both med school and grad school. But I would say maybe only like 5 to 10% of people take advantage of that. And then 90% of people live in off-campus housing. I think it's pretty dependent on where you go. If you're in like a place that's very expensive housing wise, maybe like New York or something like that, you may need to lean more on like campus housing. But for other places, like it can be even cheaper to find like off-campus housing and things like that.
This is for Mr. Grotewold. You had mentioned the asynchronous classes in New Michigan. I was wondering if that's very common, because I feel like I haven't heard much about that. But also like what your opinion on is that, because I know that you said that that gives you more free time, but I was wondering if you have any like downsides to that, or if you would recommend that compared to a more in-person teaching environment.
Yeah, so I think it's an important conversation with yourself of just like how you learn best. Um, I think so. I was a first year medical student 4.5 years ago. Something huge was happening during that time because the pandemic had just hit. And so we were 1 year after pandemic. So they had been doing solely online classes for 1 year. And then they actually opened it up and they're like, we'll also offer like sort of in-person lectures, but so few people went that they're just kind of like, okay, we're just going to keep it as online. I agree completely that having a structured day is super important. And I found like people who didn't have the structured day struggled a lot. And so the asynchronous is challenging in that aspect. But if you just watch it whenever like you would have watched the regular one, you have the advantage that you can also watch it a little bit faster. And so we leaned into like the 2x, 3x, 4x speed a lot. And that kind of like there were some professors that chatted pretty slowly. Obviously, if you need to rewatch something, you also have that advantage that you get to rewatch it, right? And everyone learns at different paces in med school. And so the reality is the lectures are pretty to the point. The way it would look like for us is they'd open the lecture to have the title, and there's no like like small talk or anything like that. They just go into it directly, mostly because it's recorded, but also because there's so much material to cover. And so for me, it's kind of like I just want to be able to study this at my pace. I have smarter classmates who maybe would watch it faster. I have others who maybe for certain subjects want to watch it slower. And so like it's really about optimizing my own time. And for me, I found that the lectures worked. I also had friends who said, I'm not going to watch any lectures and I'm only going to do it with outside materials. The advantage is medicine across the country, okay? So if you find that like you really like doing questions on UWorld or something like that, and that works for you for getting all the material, then that can be how you learn. What I would say overall is finding out how you study is the biggest sort of roadblock for those first few months of med school. Whether you love spamming flashcards on Anki, which is an app for studying flashcards, or whether you like doing questions, or whether you or just retain things really well from looking at lectures or study guides. It's about finding that. Everyone will tell you a different thing that works for them. And then there are 1.5 million resources out there. The biggest recommendation is do one or two resources from start to finish rather than doing 20 resources just a little bit, because then you miss out on a lot of information. Most of the resources are pretty similar. And so I would say I love the asynchronous, could not have imagined my first year without it. But I also know that there were some people that were kind of bummed that there weren't in person lectures and being able to chat with the faculty more. We still had office hours and things like that. So don't think just because it's asynchronous that we couldn't reach out. Faculty were really open to emails, and most of them, whenever you emailed in a question, would actually CC the whole class with like the response to that question. So you still get like those specific questions. And then there's still office hours for sure. It's not that these people suddenly are back in the clinic and they're not accessible. So you can always reach out, and really the clinician educators want to help you succeed really, really badly.
I mean, I'll kind of add on to what you said because I think that's also important. I had to change the way that I studied probably 4 times within just this first year alone. Because in undergrad, sitting there for what was it, maybe 3 hours of lecture for one class a week, and just sitting there and writing notes was enough for me because it was slow enough to where I can process it and it's fine. But here it's a quarter system. It's you can do it asynchronously, but I don't really love to do that. I prefer in person. It's just the way that I've always learned more. And so I think with that, it really just depends on you. And like for me, it works better if I take that, and if I am doing an asynchronous class, to just sit there, like maybe watch it, but then repeat the concept a couple times because I don't get it immediately the first time. I do have people who, like you said, there's always the smarter classmates who will have it one time and they're like, oh, I got it, and get an A on the exam. I am not one of those people, so I have to take the extra effort and the extra time. But in the end, I get it. So it just depends on you knowing you. Yeah.
I was gonna ask, so I'm a psychology major and I'm looking to go into neuroscience, since Vanguard only has an BA in psychology.
Would you speak up for the mic? Just.
Oh, yes, yes. Vanguard only has a BA in psychology, what are some ways that I can get some experience with either lab work? Right now I have a biology minor, so I'm trying to boost that. So that way I can get into any of the UCs here in California.
I think, have you gotten in contact with Dr. Hannah
Yes.
for his research? Okay, good. I would say that's definitely a good resource. Even looking outside for possible projects. So for me, it was Loma Linda, but you can definitely apply to CERT programs or even like in the area. I think if you have that experience just working in a lab, or just even if it's volunteering, like just investing your time in having that experience, I guess. I don't know exactly what your program requirements are. I'm not sure.
5 lab sections for undergraduate biology, and then a couple in psychology. So
Okay,
yeah.
so honestly, you'll be okay. I think just like we said earlier, CERT programs are really important. Any type of, it doesn't even have to be a summer program, it could be anything. Any type of research experience where you're in a lab and the PI can give you a letter of rec is amazing.
And I would just, the only thing I would add on to that would be when you're doing these research experiences, I think the summer and sorry for interrupting you. The summer internships are different because those are just shorter ones, but otherwise you really do want to try to stick with the same lab for a long time. And that lab can be a wet lab, so it can be pipetting and stuff, or it can be a dry lab, right? So don't forget that, like, if you don't have all the opportunities you want here in house, you can reach out somewhere else and say, hey, I'll do like data and analysis and things like that. And that can lead to usually even like faster publications or other opportunities that are a little more flexible than working in the lab directly, right? So keep your doors open in that manner. And then, but if you stay with the same lab a long time, PhD programs and MD programs love that because it shows that you have commitment. it also gives you a stronger rec letter. I supplemented that by like also doing the summer like sort of internship. So I stayed in my undergrad lab all 4 years while doing summer internships. So I got to sort of have both of those, and it gave me an excuse to just like leave over the summer. But I would not recommend switching from lab to lab throughout the year unless you're unhappy. If you're unhappy, absolutely recognize why you're unhappy and that you're unhappy and leave, like for sure.
The good thing about neuro too is that there's many different areas you can go with that. So I mean, I know this is a bit of in advance, but at least for UCR, there's like neurodegeneration, there's like autism, Fragile X studies, there's also like behavioral stuff. So it really just kind of depends on what, because a lot of neuro labs are mouse work, I'm sure as you already know. And so it depends. Like, are you a person that kind of wants to like dissect brain sections, look at cells, or are you a person that wants to do both? There are many different ones. But that's also good to like specify. So when you are writing your essays, you can say, oh, I looked into this PI's lab because they study this. And then maybe you never know, but they could let you interview with that person. Because when I applied, I just said I was into neuro, and they led me to apply with my first rotation. So you never know.
I was gonna add to that, I'm currently an undergrad, obviously, but, don't, like they said, like, hey, you don't limit yourself to only one area. I'm, like I said, I'm a major in biomedical, but I currently intern at the Village of Conservancy, and what they do there, yeah. And what they do there is that we work on habitat restoration, so it's more of the ecology side, but there's definitely a biology overlap, and so that led me to see another side of biology, which I found that I love as well. So honestly, and there's a lot of people that I met there that are wanting to go the medical route as well, but you never know, you might meet someone who can, lead you to other opportunities and open other doors for you.
And I like what you said, because no matter what kind of internship you do in your undergrad, or no matter like where you volunteer at, there's always a way that you can tie it back when you are writing your essays for grad school. So even if you're like, I was in this lab and I really liked it and I want to continue, that's great. Or you can say, hey, I was in these labs and I think I would like a different direction. As long as you explain that in your essay, then that's good. They like that. They like using specifics.
Celeste?
Yeah.
So I had a question about the application process. I just want to know how it actually was when you guys were applying. Like, did you get accepted the first time, or what did you do to improve, like, second round, or if you were doing something in your undergrad just to like boost?
You want to go first?
Yeah. So for me, I would say like the one thing that I didn't do as planned was I ended up taking a gap year and I didn't think I would. So I had sort of planned it out that I was not going to take a gap year, and I ended up just like not having the MCAT prepared in time. And I was just like, this would probably be less stressful if I just put on one more year. And it really like gap years are not like a thing that looks negative anymore. Um, I I wasn't super sure how it was gonna go when applying. So that's like a good question. Like you asked, like how many places did you apply to? How'd it go? I got in my first time, but I didn't know how it would go. I applied to a lot of schools. Median, I think for med school right now is like 16-ish, and I applied to maybe 38 or so. Did I need to? Probably not, but I really didn't want to have to apply again. And I really didn't know. So we chatted earlier about like which tier schools and things to apply to. I think I kind of was just like, I'm gonna apply to maybe 12 or so reach schools. 12 or so schools where like it's in my range, and then 12 or so schools that you would consider safety, while keeping in mind that there's no such thing as a safety school. But like that's how I would do it. And then I only applied to places where I would be happy going. So if you hate the city, don't apply to a city place because you're going to be unhappy. If you hate being in the countryside or somewhere a little more rustic, or maybe a little more rural, then don't apply there because you're going to be upset. There are so many options for applying that there's definitely going to be many, many programs that fit into sort of the mold that you want. I also prioritize being close to family. I thought that was a really important thing. And so, what I would say is meet with someone who is able to look at your application in an objective way. If you're able to do that sooner before your application becomes finalized, I think that lets you grow on it. If you have to do it at the end, ask that person realistically, where do you think I can go? And have that person sort of maybe help you. And that person can be many people. And so I think that can help a lot as well. And if you don't make it in your first time, that is not a reflection on you not being good enough. Right now, across the country, 1 in 2 people that apply to medical school do not make it in the first time. Um, for most schools, there are 10,000 applications and only 300 or so get in. And of those 300, 200 or so matriculate. And there's so many more people than those 300 that merit getting into that school. We're just looking at a huge flux right now in amount of people that are applying, and it's really competitive. But that does not mean that you're not good enough. What I would say is if it doesn't go well the first time, try to reach out and ask, what can I do for it to go better? Don't give up though. If that's your dream, don't give up. And if there are things that are limiting you and you need to shift your career path a little bit, then also recognize that as well. But I think the earlier you start asking for help, the earlier you can strategize sort of which direction you can prepare your career and your application. Good question.
Yes.
So beyond research, sorry, this is again like med school related. I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah, no, you're good. You're good.
Beyond research and like volunteer experience, what's kind of like main, like if we're looking at jobs, what kind of like main areas should we hit that would look good on the application? Because I know, or at least I've heard from some people that it's good to look somewhat well-rounded or to like reach certain areas like, oh, service job, or you work for a nonprofit or something like that, just to hit different areas. So like outside of the key, expected things like research and volunteer experience, what kind of like other things would make you look, I don't know, somewhat unique or like a good points to hit that people wouldn't expect?
Yeah, so you definitely want your clinical volunteering. That part is for sure you want that. So good on recognizing that. Other than that, like in order to look unique, there's not just by definition, there's not going to be like a roadmap on how to look unique. But what I would say is if you really like doing something and you're really passionate about it, start sort of thinking about how you can sort of sell that to a med school and make that part of your story. So for example, if you there are also necessity jobs, right? So if you're working because as a necessity, you need to work, maybe you need money to pay for undergrad, or you need money to support family or yourself or anything like that. Schools look at that very positively because that means that you're able to both study while working, while doing all the other things you need to do. And so that's a really positive thing in and of itself, regardless of if it's related to medicine or not. So don't feel like just because you're investing time away from medicine that you're not learning things or that you're not doing things that are valuable. If you're able to find a job that's related to medicine or research or something related to your career path, that's always best, but that's not always possible. So what I would say is, in terms of jobs, do what you need to do and also what you want to do, and also ideally what's most related in terms of like clubs and things like that. If you want to do something and you're passionate about it, try to join up with an organization that already exists and try to gain as much leadership as you can while doing that. And that means just starting early when you can or being very active in 1 or 2 things rather than slightly active in 10 things. And there's not also a lot of room in the application to be slightly active in 10 things. So there's only 15 activity spots. A lot of those are going to be taken up by research, clinical volunteering, things like that. So really just 2 or 3 orgs that you're super involved with. I think for the orgs that I did in undergrad, I went to every single club meeting for the 3 or 4 years that I was involved. There wasn't really a reason not to. That was my priority. And so every Wednesday or Thursday or Friday, whenever I had them, that hour or two was just blocked off. And that meant if I had to study, I had to find time to study that wasn't that time. And so if you have a goal or if you have a commitment, don't don't negotiate against that commitment. Try to find area and time somewhere else. If you need to drop a commitment, then be very strategic about dropping the commitment that will sort of be the less beneficial or the most beneficial to no longer have. But really being like committed like that, I think is the most important thing. And then if you have a passion and there's no student organization, then you start that student organization. And that's a great way for becoming a founder, becoming a leader in and of itself. And they love, love, love seeing that as well. So never feel like you can't do something just because the groundwork hasn't been laid.
I have a personal question, and it is how you managed to avoid burnout while also allowing for yourself to be successful with regards to self-study. I'm not one who studies well. Was there anything that you would suggest for a person that does not do well in self-study?
Oh, wait,
Do you
Anyone
want to
who
go?
would-
Do you want
sorry,
to
I
go?
was like, wait, for him or for both of us?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure. I think just for me, it was like, okay, if I'm at a point in the day where I'm like super tired or something, then and I know that I'm not gonna pay attention to that lecture, just stop and take a break. Because no matter what, like, you're not gonna be paying attention, even like if you really, really try. Like, if you're really just having that bad of a day or that stressed out, just take time to like breathe or to go get coffee, do something, and then come back. Because it's okay. Like, I think there is some kind of statistic on it, but the human brain is not meant to focus for more than a certain amount of hours. And so if you can't do that, then like it's not like don't feel bad. Don't have that imposter syndrome that tells you that you can't do it because you can, but you need to know how can I study? Do I get burnt out after X amount of hours? So like for me, I think there's like the Pomodoro technique where they do like 30 minutes and then you get like a 10-minute break or something like that, right? It really does help to keep you motivated to study. Mhm.
Yeah, great question, Joey. The reality is I like was not able to avoid burnout at certain parts. So, um, and that's true for your mentors as well. Like there are times where you're just burnt out. How it hits, I think, is different. It was never like a I don't want to do medicine anymore or I don't want to do research. It was just kind of like my brain needs a break. And it didn't go it was right after I finished my clinical year. Clinical year is really hard. It's really stimulating, but it's really challenging just with like needing to study while you're in the clinic. And I sort of finished that and I was expecting maybe a little bit longer of a rest. And I had to jump straight into studying for step one and step two, which are the board exams for medical school. And I was not ready to start studying for a board exam on top of that happening. And yeah, I was probably burned out for like a solid like 2 to 3 weeks. And every time I would sit down to study, it just wouldn't really stick as much. And the amount I was able to study went way down. I was like maybe could do like 4 or 5 hours a day before tapping out hard. And it's just like self-care. And so the two aspects are recognizing when you're burning out, that way you can address it, and then also recognizing what you need to not burn out. And so when thinking about sort of like figuring out your schedule for the day, I always schedule in fun activities as well. And it's sort of negotiating with yourself. It's not that I don't enjoy studying or that I don't enjoy what I do during the day, but what you do can be really tiring. And so negotiating and saying like tonight at 5 p.m., I'm gonna go work out. I'm gonna go I'm gonna go hang out with friends. Like that's what happens at 5, not before 5, but at 5. That's my reward. And that heals me for tomorrow, right? So once you start getting like that schedule, where you're able to say, oh, wait, I can do this every day. So it doesn't feel like a sprint anymore. Then you sort of entered like that marathon phase. And then just recognizing that there are some parts of your career path that are going to be less fun. And those parts for me are maybe studying for board exams. And something like studying for the MCAT can be really stressful. It's high stakes. It can be long hours. It can be, for a lot of us, it's the first really board exam or test that we've had to take that has that much weight. And so sort of recognizing that the next few months or next few weeks might be hard. And because of that, I both recognize that I need to give myself more self-love or I need to do hobbies to sort of combat that. And also saying this is not how it's going to be forever. This is not my career path forever. This is just the right now can be really helpful. And when you do, inevitably or hopefully not get burnt out, seek help, do a pause, keep the things that need to be kept alive going. So keep doing the things that you must need to do, but then also recognize that there are some things that you have to let go for a little bit. And probably with that, importantly, I would say your scheduling should include periods of time that are flex. And so if something goes wrong, I have these extra few weeks built into my schedule just like as it is. So don't plan out 6 years ahead of time with every month, week, and day picked out. Be like, hey, it'll take me roughly 4 months to do this, but it might take me five. So let me build in one more month into that schedule. And that can help a lot with dealing with burnout. Because if you have a bad day and you need to rest, then that's built into your schedule and you don't have the stress of being like, I don't have that built in.
Wait, I think I actually have a question for you, because I don't know how med school works, but do you guys get a stipend for MD PhD?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So if you're in there's essentially an NIH funded program called the MSTP, which is Medical Science Training Program, which is fully funded through the NIH version of the MD PhD. And the majority of MD PhDs around the country are this. And for those, your med school is paid for, so all tuition is paid for. And then on top of that, you receive a stipend during medical school and graduate school. And so the whole goal is for you to not need to be worrying about finances while you dedicate an extra 4 years to your career.
This is also for Nikki, sorry. Do you feel like adding
No,
a
it's
PhD
fine.
to your MD specifies your career in any way? Was it specifically to act as a physician researcher? Why are you doing a PhD MD?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think it's necessary in order to do research in your career, but I think if you want to run a lab or be a PI, which is what my current goal is, the PhD offers 4 or 5 years of protected time to really learn everything about the world of research. Medicine is really busy. Studying, working, clinical, all these things don't give a ton of time for you to at the same time be learning about like this other world of research. And so you can do some projects in the background. It can be patient projects, but it's hard to be doing wet lab research in this dedicated time. And so really for me, it came down to I wanted the dedicated, uninterrupted time to learn something that I think will be useful for me later on. And that mostly is just skills that I've determined are useful. You know, it could be data analysis, it could be coding, it could be learning wet lab techniques because I want to mentor people later on that are in a wet lab or doing, you know, biochemistry and things like that or neuroscience. And so for me, I justified it by saying that. I think that if the goal is to be a clinician full time and do some research, maybe the PhD doesn't fully make sense in that case, but I think it's different for everyone. And so I really think it comes down to do you feel like you need dedicated time to learn something about the research world because you feel like research is going to be a big part of your career later on. I think the other part too is it's okay if you think that right now and then it changes later on. So there are definitely people who have done MD PhDs who have said, I don't think I want to do research as a majority of my career later on. I think I want to do maybe 20% research, and that's okay too, because we need clinicians and we need researchers, and those people are very valuable as well. So,
Yes, okay, yes. So, my question is like, when you guys got accepted, how was like that, those first couple of weeks, like, when you were starting to enter grad school, were you like communicating with the professors there? Or was there any type of like meeting with them beforehand or something like that? Or what did that look like for you guys?
Uh, I think like at least for me, like I found out I was accepted probably 4 months before I actually started. So I had plenty of time to like look at housing, to talk to PIs in advance ahead of time as well. So I actually, like I was telling him earlier, the person that I interviewed with was my first rotation. And because during the interview, she was like, okay, well, let me know If you're interested in rotating my lab, like I'd be happy to have you. And so I just got in contact with her and it ended up working out. But yeah, I think like no one really emphasized how the lab rotation was supposed to go. So I think that was a little bit of a learning curve because nobody was like, okay, you need to be here from like 9 to 5. Like no one really says that. So I think just communication is important too. So like I said, I had in-person class in the morning because I wanted to do it. And so I just told them, hey, so I'm gonna be available from 1 to this today, or like one PI had a chart. And so I just wrote down what my availability would be to come in every single day. So as long as you have that communication with the PI or the postdoc, as far as like, oh, when can I be in lab for my rotation, then it's good. But you should definitely do that.
It's a happy moment. I mean, getting accepted is a happy moment, mostly because of all the stress that comes before it. I feel like probably the last 3 years of undergrad, at least 2.5 years of undergrad, like built up to me being like kind of stressed and being like, am I going to get in or not? Where am I going to go? And it's also, I mean, for me, it was deciding the next 8 years of my career and where I was going to be. So it was very exciting in that way as well. I found out in October and I matriculated in the next year of June/July. So I found out maybe 8 months before. And I think I kept working. Yeah, I kept working in the lab the whole time. I definitely allowed myself a little bit of time to travel and just like live, knowing that I might be low on living the next few years, which didn't end up being the case, but still it was nice. And then with my med school, we started out the medical school with a camping trip with most of the medical students. And so I got to meet a ton of my fellow classmates there. And I really prioritized just meeting people for the first month. I was just like everyone chatting with everyone. Everyone has the most interesting stories. There are people of all different ages. There are people who have done careers before. And so I really just wanted to meet everyone. Um, yeah, studying was a wake-up call. It was definitely a lot, but I think they prepared us well for it. Onboarding is good. If you don't feel well enough prepared, I think asking is necessary. But I feel like for the most part, there are a lot of mentors in like older students as well who are able to describe their own personal experiences of what it was like to do it just 1 year before. And so they can give a pretty accurate account. And I would say, for clinical rotations, for studying, for things like that, we would constantly ask the people who had done it just 1 year before, or even people in the same class who had done it months before, and ask them a little bit about, hey, what should I expect? Like, what is my day-to-day going to look like? And it can be a little harder to do that in PhD just because everyone's path is different. Yeah.
That is true. It could depend because in my program, it was super easy to make friends with the med students since, I mean, we were all taking the same classes. So, and it ended up working out. I think my cohort is a little bit shyer, so they kind of preferred to keep in like our group or just more to themselves. But I think for me, I like to talk to people, get to know people. So for me, it was no problem just to say, hey, can I study with you guys? It was very fun. Like, it's always exciting to answer, and so you don't know exactly what to expect, but that's part of the learning curve. But don't worry, it'll be fine.
Does anyone else have any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, when did you start like compiling on this in school so far do, and then like specifically like when did you start like studying and taking the MCAT?
Yeah, so I did my schools pretty like I had a few schools that I had in mind, but I did my final compilation pretty last minute. Just sort of based on my scores and how competitive I thought I would be at places. And then also just based on where in the country I thought I would be most interested in. And then studying for the MCAT, everyone has a different journey. For me, I did it my senior year of college, and that implied that you need a gap year because it takes 1 year to apply. But I had started studying my junior year in the summer, and I wasn't able to finish in time, and so it just carried over into senior year. I would say MCAT is things can go wrong, so plan with a lot of that buffer space just in case. And then for most of the other things on my application, I just sort of plan them a few years out, like the volunteering, just like from starting, college, I was like, probably should get involved in volunteering. So I tried to pick something that I was passionate in. And then same with research and things like that, just sort of trying to plan them far out. Or if you're no longer far out, it's okay to start them now and just sort of recognize, hey, like this is something that I didn't realize until later. That's totally okay too.
Beverly in the back.
Yeah, so. Or, I don't know, for medical school, you also have to get a letter of rec from the doctor, but say you're chatting with them, what would be? And you've already had the conversation of a letter of rec, and they say that they're willing, what are some like, I guess like tips, like if I should give them any extra papers of like, maybe writing out who I am, like my background, or like, yeah, what are your tips on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, for med school, you need around 5 letters of recommendation. And so it's good to have, you need 2 science letters of recommendation, or I at least used to, 1 non-science letter of recommendation. So that could be like psychology, sociology, some others as well, maybe like a language. And then you need, it's good to have a research one and then maybe a clinical one as well. And so when we're chatting about that clinical one that you just brought up, I actually wrote down all of the things before I asked for my letters of rec that I wanted each person to highlight. And I sort of like compiled all the skills that I thought I was bringing to the table. And I was like, and I just wrote down 3 or so of those skills that I thought would be best for those mentors to highlight. So say for my research one, I was like, and can you please highlight that like I've been, there's perseverance or that I, learned how to critically think, things like that. And then maybe for a clinical one, you would I framed it more as can you highlight how maybe, empathic, like being empathetic, having empathy and chatting with patients. And so that side. So you always want each rec letter to sort of fit in with telling that story, I think is really important. And so that's how I did it. And then also sensing when you're asking someone for a rec letter, if they seem, not very committed or things like that, just sort of note that. And really you want the person who's writing you a rec letter to write you a very strong rec letter, not just a rec letter. And so just keep in mind what their responses are and ask them, not can you write me a rec letter, but can you write me a strong letter of recommendation? And usually mentors will be pretty straightforward with saying, hey, I think I can write you an okay one, or yeah, I think I can write you a strong one. I've had a really good time working with you.
I mean, I'll add on to it. I mean, I know, like, I think most of you are interested in the med school applications, but for grad school, it's pretty similar. Just if I think it's just simpler because I think 3 to 5 letters of rec. I had 3, 4. And then it's 2 different essays. It's a statement of personal history and then a personal statement. And I think at least for UCs, and then the only difference is saying one is more general as of, okay, like, why do you want to go to not med school, oh my gosh. Why do you want to go to grad school versus like med school or why this school? The other one is more specific as to what topic you want and like your past research experiences. So I would definitely recommend just emailing Dr. Hannah about that because that and also getting it like grammatically checked. It's good to have both because that way, like when you are writing those essays, you are able to make sure, okay, so this person really is highlighting, like he said, you want to make sure that you highlight your skills in your essay. And I think having a personal mentor is better for that as opposed to someone who's gonna do like the grammar aspect. So having multiple people look at it definitely really helps.
I think a good question. Does anyone else have anything else? You good? Yes.
So I know we've been asking Nikki a lot of questions, but I actually have a question for them.
Oh,
But
I'm honored.
you can chime in.
It's okay.
If you'd like. So I know that you came to Vanguard, right? You did your 4 years here and then you went straight into a PhD program. Initially I wanted to do my undergrad here and then go for a master's and then apply for a PhD. So I just want to know what your experience, and then I talked to a lot of my mentors about that plan, and they kind of all lovingly told me that I was an idiot for doing that, and they said I should just go for the PhD straight away.
Depends on what you want.
Yeah. And so I just wanted to know what your experience was just applying to the PhD and then getting accepted. And then also like what characteristics you think that a person should have when they apply for like a PhD, or do you think like anybody could do a PhD? Do you understand what I'm asking?
For the first part of your question in regards to the masters, that varies because I've heard a lot of people say, well, I was a kind of a seesaw between med school and research, so I did a master's to buy me some more time, which you can do, but ultimately, I think it was at Loma Linda when a professor looked at me and he was like, okay, like, do you know with your whole heart that you want to do research? And I was like, yes. And he's like, don't waste your time. Just go. And if you don't get in, just, go find a lab, work for a bit, boost your resume, and then apply again. But with your whole heart, that's what you want to do. So apply immediately. So, I mean, I really just think it depends. And then what was the second part of your question?
So like, what kind of characteristics should a person have if they want to get through like the whole ordeal that is getting a PhD? Do you think there are characteristics of a personality that a person should have, or do you think like anyone, literally anyone could do a PhD if they really put their effort into it?
Well, it's what you said. You need to put your heart to it. You need to know that's what you want to do. You need to be perseverant. You need to go after that. You can't, I think a lot of people struggle with this idea of imposter syndrome, like, in comparison. Oh, this person got better grades than me. Like, what if they get accepted and I don't? Like, there's a lot of people, including me, that have said that, but it's, I think, more about your persistence, your willingness to grow, patience, your professionalism, right? Because you need to be interacting with PIs, you need to be understanding, especially like if you do ask for a lab rotation and they say, hey, sorry, we can't take you. You never know if that person's going to be a collaborator. So you need to have this character and this attitude of willingness, of patience, of professionalism when you interact with these people. I guess there are those character traits, but as far as if you love science, if you love research, then yeah, I mean, go for it. Don't, if you know for certain, then do it.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you very much, guys, so much for your time. We really appreciate you so much. We're gonna have this video uploaded onto the YouTube channel for the VU Free Health. So that way, in case anyone has any wants to review the video, we have a chance to do that. We'll have the Zoom open for a little bit longer, just that way we can have, if you have any personal questions, you guys can ask Nikki. Ellie's gonna be here for a little bit longer, but thank you guys so much for stopping by. We really appreciate you guys. We'll see you guys at our next event sometime. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Oh, and also feel free to leave my email in the under like in a comment in the video or something, because I really wouldn't mind if you guys were like, hey, what did you put undergrad school essay? I don't mind showing you at all. So feel free to ask me more questions about that. But yeah.
I might not, but I would.
But,
they can always contact me direct.
or yeah, feel free to ask me.
Just saying, because it's gonna be on a more public platform.
yeah,
Maybe not. Yeah.
Joey, I'm happy if you share it with anyone who's there. I know you.
All right, sounds good. Okay. It's fine. And I'll have you on that. All right. Thank you so much, guys. And if you're here for the extra credit for 112, just sit over here and you get the extra credit. There's no one in 112. Okay, well, you're in one. Okay, cool. Thank you so much.
Okay, yeah. I see you. And
You were in cheer.
That's great.
Got my I'll take your mild minor. Yeah. So I'm like, it's the I guess.
You guys want everything that you see it. Ask me all that. Other people actually really have to. Once you guys
It's all the yeah, with yeah, I've got.
I keep on wanting to look at the computer. You're right here. Thanks again for being able to be here for us. I really appreciate it. You were really helpful for our club.
Thank you, Joey. I really appreciate you inviting me. Thanks for setting this up.
I did also have one other dumb kind of question. How did you make sure and figure out what was the right career path for you? Like, how did you know, like, as opposed to just doing research? Or for me, doing med school would be taking care of people. What really made me decide not to go necessarily for the research aspect is because upon shadowing one of my doctors, who was a PhD MD, he was doing a lot of work when it came down to clinic, work at UCI. He took notes of cardiovascular patients, and that was sort of it. Do you feel like there's a way that, how did you figure out what your interests were that helped you decide on you dead set deciding I need to do PhD MD?
Yeah, so I think for me it was a lot about keeping the door open, and then I chatted a little bit about also like that dedicated time. The MD is necessary for seeing patients, and I knew I wanted patients to be involved in my career path. So I think it was more deciding like, do I need that dedicated research time or not? And then I think it comes down to saying like, once I am an MD PhD and I have that, I can sort of take my career in any way I want. So that could be anywhere like 100% research to 100% clinic, and then everything in between, um, including 0% of both, right? Like you can go into consulting and things like that. So just like the open door, I really like the openness. I don't know at what time of my career things will change, the funding situation, things like that. And so right now I think my goal is to do 80% research, 20% clinic, but we'll really see how the career develops. So I don't know for sure. That's just sort of my working plan, if you will.
Well, all right. Does anyone have any other questions? Yeah.
Oh, wait.
The camera is very.
Hi, I was kind of asking questions, but not really, but I did have a question. When you went into med school, did you ever find yourself that, you know, you lacked some skill or that you were behind, compared to others, or what did you do about it? Or did you ever feel like you were ahead compared to others?
Yeah, so I think there are times where like your background helps you out a lot. And there are times where you're just like, I've never done anything like this in my life. So my first year of med school was divided into 6 blocks, it's called. Each of those blocks sort of cover different things. The first one was biochemistry, and that was like my major in undergrad. So I was really prepared the first month. And then the second one was like immunology. And I was decently prepared for that too, because I had taken that. The third one was cardiology and like pulmonary and things like that. And I was like, I've never done anything with this. And it was the hardest time of schooling in my entire life. I also chatted with a lot of my friends, and it was hard for a lot of them too. Some of them, no. Some of them it was easy. I wouldn't say for anyone it was like a breeze, but there were some people that were having a better time than others in terms of easiness. I would say life is just like a lot about developing skills and about encountering moments when you don't have skills. And it's kind of like more about developing those skills when you need them and about being able to develop those skills rather than being like, I want to enter med school and have all of the skills that I need. Like, what's the point of going to med school if it's going to be easy, right? And so I would say, being sort of flexible in your skills or saying like when something doesn't go the way I want, I'm able to adapt is a very, very important skill that can be developed at any time. And so I would say there are times in med school that I was very underprepared. There were times that I was maybe a little, I wouldn't say overprepared, but more prepared. And I would say that essentially just like for me was, am I finding my new novel skills and things like that in the classes that are really hard at this point? Or if it's an easier part, am I reaching out elsewhere to sort of get that flexibility and get more learning from somewhere? That's a really good question. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. I know it kind of like goes back to having imposter syndrome. Like, do I really belong here? Like, do I have everything that it takes? But thank you so much.
Yeah, imposter syndrome is really real, but I think it's good to feel like you've earned something too. And so at times, a lot of like this application, the cycle and the process can make you feel like they're judging you. I think being empowered and being like, I have given everything to be a doctor, and I would be an amazing physician if that's the goal that you want. It's really empowering, and I think that can relieve a little bit of the stress as well. People will see if you act that way, not, and I don't mean in an arrogant way, but if you're
Yeah.
confident about knowing that you have the skills to do well, that's a really, really important thing.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, and being like determined, just like,
Yeah.
just knowing that you can do it. Basically.
Agreed.
Thank you.
And you can do it. You got this.
Thank you. I don't plan to go to medical school, but I do want to pursue clinical lab science.
Yeah.
So it's just it's like the post-bachelor's program. The only problem is that Vanguard doesn't offer all of the courses needed. Like for example, hematology. We have immunology, but there's other ones like analytical chemistry, which is another way of saying clinical chemistry. So Vanguard doesn't have those, meaning I would have to take an extra year or either transfer out now, but it's still gonna be another 2 years to ultimately become a clinical lab scientist. So that's why I know it's not that I had plus but I was kind of in the mindset of should I just, should I just attain my bachelor's and figure out where I could go from there, or actually pursue clinical science? Because I'm passionate about being on the lab. I think that's one of my more that's one of the being in a lab setting.
Yeah, I would say don't negotiate on what you want to do unless you need to negotiate. But like if you need to take a few extra classes, there are a lot of options for taking some of those extra classes. Some are online classes, some are at a community college, some are maybe as like signing up at another university during the summer or right after, right? Saying like, hey, I know I'm going to need to do 1 or 2 semesters right after at another school that offers these. And that's just part of my plan to get to where I need to go, which can come with its own challenges, right? But I wouldn't say like, just because you finish with a bachelor's, if that hasn't given you what you need to go on to the next step, then go grab whatever you need to go on to the next step. And that could be a few more classes, that could be a master's, it could be whatever you might want. Yeah. And so I always look at it backwards. I always look at what do I want and what do I need for that, rather than what do I have and where can that get me? Because you can always change what you have, but what you want should be the non-negotiable.
Right.
I have his email and I'll ask him.
Thank you so much.
It's great to meet you.
For that.
Good luck
It
with
was
your
actually-
journey. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
It's like right before, it's like, it's in the fall, so they are looking for students to apply for the.
I'll
have a chance to go see.
No, I think we're good. Thank you again.
On our Instagram page.
Ellie,
So it's like-
do you mind actually writing down your email so I can send it out to the people?
Yeah.
Thank you again.
Wait.
All right, bye,
did you-
Joey. Take care. Thanks for having me. Great to meet you, Ellie, and everyone.
Wait, 1 second.
Actually, can I ask a quick question? There's one more question I brought up, but med school, when you're doing like the MD PhD stuff, is it like year one, you're doing med school and then you do your PhD and then you go back to med school? Or do your PhD, it's like MD first, then PhD?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Yeah. It's different across each program across the country. The way mine is set up is I do a year of med school. During my summer of med school, I go do my first rotation. Then I do my second year of med school, which for us is clinical year. Then I take step 1 and step 2, so my board exams for med school. And then I fully leave med school, or at least fully leave. I go do my PhD full time. During my PhD, the first 2 years are dedicated PhD time. And then the last 2 years, I do a clinical sort of course throughout like once a month or so throughout the last 2 years just to maintain some of my clinical knowledge. And then I go back to med school at the end for 1 year. So it's a little bit of like 3 and then
Like
PhD.
jumping back and forth, kind of.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah, but in an organized way. And that's sort of like the how good and organized the MD PhD program itself determines how good of a time you're gonna have with that cycle. Yeah.
All right, thank you. I just wanted
Yeah.
to, I don't know anything about med school anymore. Since Lauren was like kind of seesawing between the two, so.
That's fair. Well, it was great meeting you. Yeah.
Yes, nice to meet you. Have a good
Yeah.
rest of your day.
You too. Take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Next summer. If you want, I will,